Years passed, and Elijah's hard work began to bear fruit in ways that exceeded even his wildest dreams. After graduating at the top of his high school class, he earned a full scholarship to a prestigious prep school, an opportunity made possible by Judge Hargrove's glowing recommendation letter and his own relentless determination. At the prep school, Elijah stood out not only for his intellect but also for his compassion. He founded a student-run legal literacy club, teaching classmates about their rights and encouraging them to think critically about justice and fairness. His peers admired him, not just because he was smart, but because he used his gifts to lift others up. From there, Elijah went on to attend Harvard Law School, where he continued to shine. The rigorous curriculum challenged him, but it also fueled his passion. He spent summers interning at civil rights organizations, working tirelessly to advocate for marginalized communities. During his final year, he wrote a groundbreaking thesis on reforming juvenile justice systems, which caught the attention of national policymakers. By the time he graduated, Elijah had already begun making waves in the legal world, a young man determined to reshape the system from within. But Elijah never forgot where he came from. After passing the bar exam with flying colors, he returned to his hometown, ready to give back to the community that had shaped him. With the support of Judge Hargrove, who had since retired but remained a close mentor, Elijah opened a nonprofit organization called Freedom Path. The name was no coincidence. It was inspired by the graffiti tag that had once landed him in court. Freedom Path aimed to provide free legal resources, workshops, and mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, helping them navigate challenges both inside and outside the justice system. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for Freedom Path took place on a crisp autumn morning, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Parents brought their children, teachers clapped proudly, and local leaders gave speeches praising Elijah's vision and dedication. As Elijah stood behind the podium, preparing to address the crowd, he felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, pride, and humility. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the same calm authority that had captivated Judge Hargrove years ago. "This isn't just my story," he began, scanning the sea of familiar faces. "It's our story. Growing up, I saw how easy it is for people to get lost in a system that doesn't always see them as individuals. But I also learned something else, that one person can make a difference. Whether it's a judge who believes in you, a teacher who pushes you to try harder, or a parent who sacrifices everything so you can dream bigger, we all need someone to remind us of our worth." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "That's why we're here today, to remind every child, every teenager, every young adult in this room that they matter, that their voices matter, that no matter where they come from or what obstacles they face, they have the power to create change, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of others." As applause erupted around him, Elijah spotted Judge Hargrove standing near the front row. Her eyes glistened with tears as she mouthed two simple words: "Thank you." Later, during the reception, she pulled him aside for a quiet moment. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "you've done more than prove yourself. You've shown the world what's possible when talent meets heart. I always knew you were destined for greatness. You just needed someone to believe in you." Elijah smiled, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "And now," he replied softly, "I get to be that person for someone else." In the years that followed, Freedom Path grew into a nationwide movement, inspiring similar initiatives across the country. Elijah became a sought-after speaker, sharing his journey with audiences ranging from classrooms to congressional hearings. Yet, despite his growing fame, he remained grounded, always prioritizing the needs of those he served over personal accolades. Looking back, Elijah knew his path hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. From the courtroom trial that changed his life to the nonprofit that transformed countless others, he had proven that intelligence, resilience, and kindness could overcome even the toughest odds. And though he still carried the lessons of his past, he faced the future with unwavering hope, knowing that true freedom wasn't found in escaping hardship. It was in using your struggles to help others find theirs. Copy. Ask. Explain. Elijah's bond with Judge Hargrove grew stronger as the months passed. What started as a summer internship turned into a mentorship that shaped his life in ways he never imagined. Every time they met, she challenged him to think deeper, question harder, and dream bigger. She introduced him to legal professionals who shared their stories of triumphs and failures, showing Elijah that success wasn't about being perfect, it was about perseverance. One Saturday afternoon, Judge Hargrove invited Elijah to join her at a local youth legal aid clinic. The clinic provided free advice to underprivileged families navigating issues like housing disputes, custody battles, and minor criminal charges. At first, Elijah hesitated. He didn't feel qualified to help. After all, he was just a teenager. But the judge insisted. "You don't need a degree to listen," she told him. Sometimes, people just need someone who cares enough to hear them out. When they arrived, Elijah was struck by the diversity of faces in the waiting room. Parents juggling toddlers on their laps, teenagers scrolling through phones while trying to stay patient, elderly folks clutching folders filled with papers they barely understood. It was a stark reminder of how many lives were affected by the justice system, and how few resources were available to guide them. Judge Hargrove assigned Elijah to assist a young woman named Lisa, whose landlord had refused to make repairs to her apartment despite repeated complaints. As Elijah listened to her story, he realized something. Lisa wasn't asking for much. She simply wanted safety and dignity for herself and her two young children. Yet the law seemed impossibly complicated to her, a maze of terms and procedures she couldn't navigate alone. Drawing on everything he'd learned from Judge Hargrove and his internship, Elijah broke things down step by step. He explained tenant rights, helped Lisa draft a formal complaint, and even suggested community organizations that could offer additional support. By the end of their meeting, Lisa looked visibly relieved. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know where else to turn." That moment stayed with Elijah long after he left the clinic. For the first time, he saw the tangible impact of what he loved doing, not just understanding the law, but using it to empower others. Inspired, he began volunteering regularly at the clinic, dedicating weekends to helping those in need. Word spread quickly among the staff about the quiet yet brilliant teenager who could simplify complex legal jargon and approach every case with genuine empathy. Soon, Elijah became a familiar face, earning nicknames like the Kid Lawyer and Professor E. As his reputation grew, so did his confidence. One evening, while discussing a particularly challenging case with Judge Hargrove, she asked him a question that stopped him in his tracks. "Elijah, have you thought about where you see yourself in 10 years? He paused, considering the weight of her words. "I want to be someone who makes a difference," he replied honestly. "Not just in courtrooms, but in communities. I want to help kids like me, kids who feel stuck or overlooked, realize they have power too." The judge smiled, clearly pleased with his answer. "Then let me ask you this. Why wait 10 years? Start now. Use your voice, your mind, your heart. You're already making a difference. You just need to trust yourself." Those words ignited something inside Elijah. Over the next few months, he took the initiative to organize workshops at the clinic, teaching teens about basic legal rights and responsibilities. He created flyers and distributed them around his neighborhood, encouraging young people to attend. His sessions weren't lectures. They were conversations, full of questions and laughter, designed to demystify the law and show others that it wasn't something to fear. By the time he graduated high school, Elijah had become a pillar of hope in his community. Parents sought his advice, teachers praised his dedication, and peers admired his humility. Though he still faced challenges, including financial hurdles when applying to prestigious schools, he tackled each obstacle with the same determination that had carried him through the courtroom trial. And through it all, Judge Hargrove remained by his side, cheering him on. She often reminded him of one simple truth: Elijah, you've always had greatness within you. All I did was shine a light on it. With her encouragement and his unshakable resolve, Elijah stepped into the next chapter of his life, ready to inspire change, not just for himself, but for everyone counting on him to lead the way. As Elijah stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of the past few weeks finally began to lift. The hallway outside was quiet, save for the sound of his footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe easily. But even as relief washed over him, a new thought took root in his mind. This wasn't just about him anymore. He had been given a second chance, and he didn't want to waste it. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Hargrove sat for a moment, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. She had seen countless cases during her career, but none quite like this one. Elijah's intelligence and determination had left an impression she knew wouldn't fade anytime soon. As she gathered her papers, she called out to him before he could leave the building entirely. "Elijah," she said, her voice warm yet commanding. "A word, please." Elijah turned back, unsure of what to expect. Had he done something wrong? Was there more paperwork to sign? But when he returned to the courtroom, Judge Hargrove greeted him with a small smile. "I have an idea," she began, leaning forward slightly. "This summer, I'm looking for someone to assist my court clerk with organizing files and observing proceedings. It's not glamorous work, but it's a chance to see how the legal system operates up close. Would you be interested?" For a moment, Elijah was speechless. This wasn't just any opportunity. It was a chance to step into the world he had spent years dreaming about. His eyes lit up with excitement, but he managed to keep his composure. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied earnestly. "I'd love that." The judge nodded approvingly. "Good. Report here next Monday at 9 sharp. Then, after a pause, she added, "And Elijah, don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong in this field. You've earned your place." When Elijah told his mother about the internship later that evening, she couldn't contain her pride. Sitting at their small kitchen table, she clasped his hands in hers, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've always been special, Elijah," she said softly. "Your father would be so proud of you." Hearing those words made his chest tighten, but in a good way. It reminded him why he had worked so hard, to honor his dad's memory and make his family proud. Over the course of the summer, Elijah threw himself into the internship with the same intensity he brought to everything else. Every morning, he arrived early, eager to learn. He observed hearings, helped organize case files, and even accompanied Judge Hargrove during meetings with attorneys. She became not just a mentor but also a guide, teaching him the nuances of fairness, empathy, and leadership within the justice system. One afternoon, while sorting through old case records, Elijah stumbled upon a file involving another teenager who had been wrongfully accused of vandalism, a case eerily similar to his own. Though the charges had eventually been dropped, the young boy had struggled to move past the stigma of being labeled a criminal. Something about the story struck a chord deep within Elijah. He realized then that his journey wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about helping others avoid the same struggles. By the end of the summer, Elijah had gained more than experience. He had found his calling. Judge Hargrove noticed the change in him too. On his last day, she pulled him aside and handed him a letter of recommendation. "This is for whenever you're ready to apply to prep schools or colleges," she said. "You'll need opportunities that challenge you, places where your gifts can shine." Elijah accepted the envelope with trembling hands, gratitude swelling in his chest. He knew this was only the beginning. With every lesson learned, every injustice uncovered, he grew more determined to use his knowledge and passion to help others fight for fairness. And though he still had a long road ahead, one thing was certain. Elijah Johnson was no longer just a boy caught in a difficult situation. He was becoming someone who could change lives, including his own. Elijah's request for the surveillance footage hung in the air like a challenge, one that neither the prosecutor nor Judge Hargrove could ignore. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, flipping through his file again, as if hoping to find some loophole or excuse to delay the inevitable. But Elijah wasn't about to let him off the hook. "If there's footage," he pressed, his voice calm but insistent, "it'll show the truth. Either I was there, or I wasn't. And if I wasn't, then this whole case falls apart." Judge Hargrove glanced at the prosecutor, her patience wearing thin. "Mr. Daniels," she said sharply, "is there any reason why we don't have access to that footage yet? It's been weeks since the incident." The prosecutor stammered, clearly caught off guard by both Elijah's persistence and the judge's growing frustration. "Your Honor, we've been coordinating with the community center's management," he replied weakly. "There were some technical issues." "Technical issues?" Elijah interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Or just laziness? Because if you'd done your job properly, we wouldn't be sitting here wasting time." His tone wasn't disrespectful, but it carried an edge of authority that made the prosecutor flush red. Even the court clerk stifled a small chuckle behind her hand. The judge held up a hand to silence them both. "Enough," she said firmly. Then, turning to the prosecutor, she added, "I want that footage on my desk by tomorrow morning. No excuses." The prosecutor nodded quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. Elijah allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He knew he had struck a nerve. And more importantly, he had forced the system to work the way it was supposed to. The next day, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the footage was finally played on a small screen set up near the judge's bench. What it revealed shocked everyone. The grainy video showed a figure running away from the community center late at night, but it wasn't Elijah. The person on the screen was taller, wearing a hoodie pulled low over their face, and carrying a backpack slung over one shoulder. As the camera zoomed in slightly, a familiar logo on the backpack became visible. It belonged to a local high school, the same one Elijah attended. Elijah leaned forward, his heart racing as realization dawned on him. He recognized the gait, the posture, the way the person moved. It was Marcus, a classmate who had bullied him relentlessly over the past year. Marcus had mocked Elijah for being quiet, for spending too much time reading books, and for not fitting in with the cool crowd. Now, it seemed, Marcus had gone a step further, framing Elijah for a crime he didn't commit. When the video ended, Judge Hargrove turned to Elijah, her expression unreadable. "Do you know who that is?" she asked quietly. Elijah nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yes, Your Honor. That's Marcus Carter. He goes to my school." He hesitated, then added, "He's the reason I was questioned in the first place. He saw me walking home that night and must have planted the paint cans near my backpack to make it look like I did it." The prosecutor looked pale, scrambling to regroup as the case against Elijah crumbled before his eyes. "Your Honor, we can investigate this new lead." "There's no need," Judge Hargrove interrupted, her voice firm. She turned to Elijah, her gaze softening slightly. "Elijah, based on what we've seen here today, I'm dismissing all charges against you. You're free to go." A wave of relief washed over Elijah, but he didn't celebrate. Instead, he stood up slowly, his mind already racing ahead. He knew this wasn't the end. Not really. Marcus might have framed him out of spite, but Elijah understood that the real problem ran deeper than one bully's actions. Kids like Marcus acted out because they felt powerless, trapped in a system that often ignored their struggles until it was too late. Elijah wanted to change that, not just for himself, but for others like him. As he gathered his things and walked out of the courtroom, Elijah felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had fought for justice once, and he had won. But this victory wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about proving that even when the odds were stacked against you, standing up for the truth could make all the difference. And Elijah wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. Judge Hargrove leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the bench as she studied Elijah. The courtroom was still eerily quiet, save for the faint rustling of papers and the occasional scribble of the court reporter's pen. But Elijah didn't seem to notice. His focus was unwavering, His dark eyes locked onto the judge, as if he were waiting for her next move in a chess match. She had seen plenty of kids come through her courtroom. Some defiant, some scared, some indifferent, but never someone like him. Elijah wasn't just answering questions, he was teaching her something. Curiosity finally got the better of her. "Elijah," she said, her voice softer now, almost conversational, "how did you learn all this? I mean, most adults don't know half of what you've just explained." It was a genuine question, one that reflected not only her surprise, but also a growing respect for the young boy sitting before her. Elijah hesitated for a moment, his hands resting on the table in front of him. For the first time since the hearing began, he looked unsure, as if deciding how much to share. Then, with a small sigh, he spoke. "Like I said earlier, my dad was a paralegal. He used to bring home cases he was working on, and sometimes he'd explain them to me. At first, I didn't really understand it all. I was just a kid, but after he passed away, I started reading the books he left behind. It helped me feel closer to him, you know." His voice wavered slightly, but he quickly steadied himself, clearing his throat before continuing. "I guess I kept going because it made sense to me," he added. "The law isn't just rules. It's about fairness, about making sure people get treated right. And when I read those books, it felt like I was learning how to protect myself, and maybe even help others someday." The judge nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. There was a sincerity in Elijah's words that resonated with her. This wasn't about showing off or trying to win an argument. It was personal. He wasn't reciting facts from memory. He was speaking from the heart, driven by a desire to honor his father's legacy, while also carving out his own path. She glanced at the prosecutor, who was still fumbling through his notes, clearly unprepared for the depth of Elijah's knowledge. Then she turned her attention back to the boy in front of her. "You're not just smart, Elijah," she said, her tone warm but firm. "You're principled. That's rare, especially at your age." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And it makes me wonder, if you're so passionate about the law, why are we even here today?" It was a loaded question, one that forced Elijah to confront the reality of the situation. He shifted slightly in his seat, his gaze dropping to the table for a brief moment before meeting hers again. "I didn't do what they're accusing me of," he said firmly. "But even if I had, I'd want to make things right. I believe in second chances, Judge Hargrove. I think everyone deserves one, including me." His honesty struck a chord with her. Here was a boy who wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for understanding, for the chance to be seen as more than a label or a statistic. In that moment, Judge Hargrove realized that this case wasn't just about vandalism or graffiti. It was about potential. Elijah's potential to rise above circumstances, to use his gifts for good, and to become someone who could make a real difference in the world. As she sat there, considering everything Elijah had said, she couldn't shake the feeling that this hearing might change both of their lives forever. She had entered the courtroom expecting to teach a lesson about accountability and responsibility. Instead, she found herself learning something far more valuable: that intelligence, integrity, and resilience could exist in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes all it took was believing in someone to help them unlock their true potential. The courtroom was so quiet you could almost hear the clock ticking on the wall. Judge Hargrove sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable as she processed what Elijah had just said. Most teenagers would have stumbled over their words or simply agreed with whatever the authority figure in front of them said. But not Elijah. He wasn't just answering her questions, he was dissecting them, piece by piece, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Elijah pressed on, his voice calm but firm. "You mentioned physical evidence," he continued, looking directly at the judge. "But according to the Fourth Amendment, any evidence collected has to follow proper procedures. If the police didn't have a warrant or probable cause when they searched my backpack, then that evidence shouldn't even be considered valid." His words hung in the air, sharp and precise. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing down at his notes as if trying to find something to counter Elijah's argument. Judge Hargrove raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Where did you learn about the Fourth Amendment?" she asked, her tone curious rather than confrontational. It was a fair question. Most kids his age wouldn't know the first thing about constitutional law, let alone how to apply it in real life. But Elijah wasn't fazed. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "I read about it," he replied matter-of-factly. "My dad used to work as a paralegal, so we had a lot of law books at home. After he passed away, I started reading them because, well, I wanted to understand what he loved so much about the law." For a brief moment, his voice softened, and there was a flicker of emotion in his eyes. But just as quickly, he composed himself, straightening up again. "It's not just about rules, it's about fairness. And right now, this case doesn't feel fair." The judge nodded slowly, her curiosity deepening. She glanced at the prosecutor, who seemed unsure of how to respond. Elijah wasn't acting like a typical defendant. He was behaving more like a skilled attorney, pointing out flaws in the prosecution's case without missing a beat. It was clear that he had done his homework, and then some. Taking advantage of the stunned silence, Elijah decided to push further. "There's also the issue of surveillance footage," he added. "If someone really did see me, or anyone else, running away from the scene, why hasn't the video from the community center cameras been reviewed? That footage could prove once and for all whether I was even there that night." This time, the prosecutor spoke up, clearing his throat nervously. "We're still in the process of obtaining that footage," he muttered, avoiding eye contact with both Elijah and the judge. But Elijah wasn't satisfied with vague excuses. "If it's part of the investigation, shouldn't it already be here?" he countered, his tone polite but pointed. "Delaying access to evidence only makes it harder to get to the truth. Isn't that what this is all about?" The room fell silent again, the weight of Elijah's logic sinking in. Even the court clerk stopped typing mid-sentence, glancing up at the young boy in awe. What had started as a routine juvenile hearing was quickly turning into something extraordinary. Elijah wasn't just defending himself. He was exposing weaknesses in the system, one statement at a time. Judge Hargrove studied him closely, her initial skepticism giving way to admiration. This wasn't just a teenager playing smart. This was a young mind operating on a level far beyond his years. She realized that Elijah wasn't trying to manipulate the situation. He genuinely believed in justice and was using his knowledge to fight for it. For the first time, she saw the case in a new light. Maybe Elijah wasn't guilty after all. Or maybe there was more to the story than anyone had bothered to uncover. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. Elijah Johnson wasn't going down without a fight. Judge Margaret Hargrove adjusted her glasses and glanced at the file in front of her. She had heard dozens of cases like this one. Kids accused of vandalism, petty theft, or other minor offenses. Most of them were straightforward, but something about Elijah felt different. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, sitting straight-backed and alert, as if he were studying every word she said. Or maybe it was the quiet confidence in his expression, a sharp contrast to the nervous fidgeting she usually saw from teenagers in court. Whatever it was, Judge Hargrove decided to try something unconventional. "All right, Elijah," she began, leaning forward slightly. "I want to play a little game with you. It's called Truth or Lie. I'm going to give you two statements about what happened that night at the community center. One will be true, and the other will be false. Your job is to tell me which is which, and explain how you know." She paused, watching for his reaction. Instead of looking confused or intimidated, Elijah tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes narrowing with curiosity. The judge continued, "Here's your first set of statements. Statement A. You were seen running away from the scene by a witness who lives nearby. Statement B. There's no physical evidence linking you directly to the graffiti." She folded her hands on the desk and waited, her tone calm but firm. To anyone else, this might have seemed like a simple exercise designed to test honesty. But Elijah knew better. He recognized the subtle challenge hidden beneath her words, a chance to prove not just his innocence, but also his understanding of the legal process. Elijah didn't answer right away. He took a moment to think, his mind racing through everything he'd learned about evidence collection and eyewitness testimony. Witness accounts could be unreliable, especially if they were based on fleeting glimpses or assumptions. Physical evidence, on the other hand, was harder to dismiss, but only if it met certain standards. He looked up at the judge and nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "I understand." What Elijah didn't realize yet was that Judge Hargrove wasn't just testing his truthfulness. She was also testing his ability to reason under pressure. Her game wasn't meant to trick him. It was meant to teach him. By presenting these statements, she hoped to show him the importance of accountability and critical thinking. But Elijah had plans of his own. As he prepared to respond, he noticed something crucial. Both statements were technically true, or at least partially so. The witness had indeed claimed to see someone fleeing the scene, but their description hadn't matched his height or clothing. And while there was paint found near his backpack, there was no direct proof tying it to the graffiti itself. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was an opportunity. With a small, almost imperceptible smile, Elijah leaned forward slightly. "Let me start with statement B," he said, choosing his words carefully. "You're right. There's no direct physical evidence linking me to the graffiti. Just because paint cans were found doesn't mean I used them. Anyone could have left them there." He paused, letting the weight of his argument sink in before continuing. And statement A. "Well, witnesses can make mistakes. If the person they saw running away wasn't wearing the same clothes as me, or wasn't even my size, then that statement isn't entirely accurate either." The courtroom fell silent. Even the prosecutor raised an eyebrow, surprised by Elijah's clarity and composure. Judge Hargrove studied him closely, her initial curiosity now replaced by something resembling admiration. She hadn't expected him to dissect her statements so thoroughly or so quickly. What started as a simple exercise in honesty had turned into something far more intriguing. Elijah wasn't just playing along. He was rewriting the rules of the game. The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. 14-year-old Elijah Johnson sat nervously at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly together. His dark eyes darted around the room, taking in the stern faces of the judge, the prosecutor, and the court clerk. He felt out of place in this formal setting, dressed in clothes borrowed from his older brother because nothing else fit quite right. Outside these walls, Elijah was just an ordinary teenager who loved basketball, video games, and spending hours buried in books about history and law. But today, he wasn't here to talk about his hobbies or dreams. He was here to defend himself against charges of vandalism. Elijah had been accused of spray painting graffiti on the side of a local community center, a bold red tag that read "Freedom." The police claimed they found cans of paint near his backpack when they questioned him near the scene. To most people, it seemed like an open and shut case, a troubled kid with too much time on his hands. But what no one knew, what the judge, the prosecutor, and even his own public defender failed to realize, was that Elijah wasn't your average teenager. Beneath his calm exterior lay a mind sharper than most adults. With an IQ of 165, Elijah had always been different. While other kids played outside after school, he could often be found curled up in a corner of the library, flipping through thick volumes of constitutional law. His fascination with the justice system began years ago, inspired by his late father, who worked as a paralegal before passing away unexpectedly. After his dad's death, Elijah made it his mission to learn everything he could about the law, not because he wanted to become a lawyer, but because he believed understanding the rules of the world would help him make sense of it. As Judge Margaret Hargrove entered the courtroom, her robe flowing behind her, Elijah felt a knot tighten in his stomach. She was known for being tough but fair, especially in juvenile cases. Her sharp gaze swept over the room before settling on him. For a moment, their eyes met, and Elijah wondered if she saw the same thing everyone else did. A scared boy caught up in something bigger than himself. What she didn't know, and what Elijah wasn't ready to reveal yet, was that he wasn't afraid of her questions. In fact, he welcomed them. Over the past few days, Elijah had spent hours analyzing every detail of the case against him. He'd memorized statutes, reviewed precedents, and mentally prepared arguments that would leave even seasoned attorneys speechless. All he needed was the chance to speak. When the bailiff called the court to order, Elijah took a deep breath. This wasn't just about proving his innocence anymore. It was about showing the world that intelligence and potential weren't limited to certain zip codes or backgrounds. As Judge Hargrove began speaking, Elijah leaned forward slightly, ready to face whatever came next. Little did he know, this hearing would change not only the course of his life, but also the way others viewed the power of knowledge and determination.